Welcome to the Diving Deep podcast, Waseem, founder of Pilot. It's lovely to have you here. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I have a set of questions that really want to pick out the insights that you have, given I feel like you have a particularly unique view on the startup ecosystem, both as a founder of Pilot, where you have worked with so many startups, and then as an angel investor, where I think you've invested in quite a few. I don't know what the count is. I don't know if you say what the count is, but I'm pretty sure it's not.
And it's like 40 plus. It's a fair number.
Yeah. So I feel like you have like a really broad, good view of startups and finance. And so I'm going to try and define the intersection of those two. I think you'll have amazing insights between the intersection of those two. So the first one that I wanted to ask you is, you work with thousands of startups at Pilot, and you've built 3 companies across super different markets. And so, that gives you like a pretty good perspective, I think, on what makes for success. How do you compare the companies that scale efficiently versus those that really end up struggling? And like, especially from a financial lens, like what are the things that end up holding people back?
It's interesting because the early days and the later stage are so different, where the early days, it really is just product market fit, product market fit, product market fit. Like, are you building a thing people want? And like, if you aren't doing that, it doesn't matter how good the unit economics are. It doesn't matter what CAC is. It's just like everything is just irrelevant. And so you can, in some ways, there's a temptation to just ignore that stuff in the early days. And I'm not sure it's wrong. Now, of course, as the company grows and progresses, suddenly that stuff tips from didn't matter at all to actually like of existential importance, which is like, okay, we're trying to scale this thing up. Are we happy about that? Do we even know what this stuff costs us, and like how does it scale as we pump more dollars in? Like, I think the biggest difference between the early stage and later stage is the later stage is all about building a machine where you put in $1 and you want to get $1.01 out or more, and then just like doing that over and over and over again. And I think the challenge is these are pretty different skill sets, right? Like the people that are good at the first are frequently not as good at the second, and vice versa.
Yeah. I think the thing you were saying makes total sense. And I imagine a lot of people know that this is true, but I imagine that it's actually kind of hard to determine what mode they should be operating in, because it's not like a clear, bright line, right?
No, not at all.
Any thoughts on that? Like how to find the line?
I mean, historically, probably like what people would have said is as long as it's growing, you kind of get a pass on the rest of this stuff. Is that still the case in 2025? Like unclear. The vibe has kind of shifted and in some interesting ways around, okay, like growth at all costs maybe is a little bit out. Like, yes, we want growth, but we want sustainable growth. And every fundraising round should be your last fundraising round. And like, it's very interesting to kind of see how quickly the narrative has shifted here in a way that I think, look, is actually probably healthier in the sense that like, yes, you, the founder, have more control over your destiny when the business is sustainable or has a path to sustainability, as opposed to just kind of like YOLO, like, let's just hope we, can land the plane as we're flying it.
I do find 2025 to be very funny in that it's not as absolute as 2021 was, and it's not as absolute as 2023 was. It is like somehow life has become nuanced again.
Yes, I agree. There was like a tweet about this just yesterday where I think like someone tweeted like, oh, there was a YC founder who was like, I want to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. Like, we're going to be super profitable and we're going to grow. And Parker Conrad was just like, that's not really how this works. If your thing actually has product market fit and other people are aware that this is a good market, other people are just going to like dump VC into this thing and you're just going to get hosed by them. And I think both are true, meaning like, yes, as a founder, you get more optionality by like building this thing sustainably. And also, if that's not what your competition is doing, you definitely risk having your lunch eaten. So you have to know what game you're playing. And that's always true, right? Like,
yeah.
If you get VC backing for a company that really wants to be a lifestyle business, and I don't use that term pejoratively, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
And similarly, like if you're trying to play the VC game, but you are cash constrained, you are going to struggle to play against the people who have bigger wallets, who are opening them and spending more freely.
especially having operated companies through various markets. You've been doing this a while, three companies in. What are things that I guess like financial habits that you have developed over time, that are both things that like reflect your personal development, the startup's development, and kind of the various weathers, so to speak, that you have operated through?
Yeah. So we started the first company that we did in 2008 and we bootstrapped. This was just after the financial crisis and we bootstrapped it. So we had no external capital. We like won a business plan competition and we got a government grant, neither of which I really recommend as funding sources, but that's how we happened to do it. And there was this real like East Coast discipline to the business. Like you just couldn't spend money that you didn't have. Like if you wanted to hire someone, you needed to get more revenue. And so like as revenue grew, we would like look at it and be like, oh, okay, we're now generating enough profit where we can safely do XYZ. So it's like we were very hawk-eyed on the financials and specifically really around like burn rate and runway to make sure that like, okay, we can safely do these things without running out of money. And I think that has served us very well, that like that discipline is still good to have even in a world where, cash is being distributed very generously and where it's easy and tempting to forget that. And actually even worse, where your investors will tell you like, hey, you just raised a bunch of money, go spend it to grow faster. It's like, actually that is some very dangerous advice in certain cases. So I think that was a product, I think, of our first company starting in 2008. And that I think has served us well through the lifetime of the company. One of the things I think the lesson of pilot for me is really about the importance of gross margin, which is like, honestly, gross margin was not a topic I thought a lot about in our previous companies. And structurally also, like, I didn't kind of really have to because they were like pure software companies. And like then the sort of nature of B2B SaaS by default is like the gross margins are pretty reasonable unless you kind of do something to cause them not to be. In our business, in this kind of tech-enabled services business, the margins want to be bad and you sort of have to work explicitly to make them good. And so I think it was interesting sort of being forced to focus on a metric that honestly we historically had not paid much attention to in our previous ventures. And in fact, I sort of wish we had scrutinized that harder in the earlier days because I think it would have influenced structurally some of the decisions we made about how to do what it is we're doing.
Is there like a good sort of way to generalize that advice? Because if you were building a software company and you scrutinize gross margins early, you're like totally doing it wrong. But there's probably something else that you probably do want to scrutinize early.
Probably like SaaS metrics, right? Like what is your retention? Like, what is ACV? What does the expansion look like? Like, all of this stuff is kind of business model appropriate. Like what are the things? The shorthand, this is a little bit not very first principles, but it's still helpful. It's like, what are your investors looking at? Like, I think it is a very healthy simulator to say, okay, if we wanted to raise a next round, what are they going to ask? And what thresholds do those metrics need to clear? And how do we track them so that we make sure we're on a trajectory to clear them? Or what is the path between where we are and profitability? Like you kind of have to be pointed at one of those two targets. And you don't have to necessarily commit, but you have to sort of know, okay, this is option A, this is option B. There's a dead zone in between where the company fails.
Yeah.
So you kind of either have to steer the ship all the way over to option B or all the way over to option A. And so I think understanding how far you are from each, even if you're not necessarily going to go to it, like does really, really matter.
I like that because there's clearly this, what investors are looking at is like a compressed answer to the question of like building a certain type of good business. And it's funny because I feel like amongst founder circles, sometimes the narrative is like, oh, like the investors are the most important people in the room and you always have to serve them. Or sometimes the narrative is the exact opposite, which is like, these people are complete idiots and like you should trust nothing that they say. And
sort of both are true, actually.
Right. And I wonder if you like, how do you tell people how to think about that? Which one is true when, I guess?
Sure. Well, okay. I actually have a good answer to this, which is the things that are specific to your business, you are going to know better than your investors if you're doing a good job. Like I very rarely, and I say this with respect because our investors are great and I like them. And guys, if you're listening, like keep up the good work or whatever. I never want to hear product advice from our investors. Like if you know more about what we should be building than I do, I'm not spending enough time with customers. And it's pretty unlikely that you have like some leverage or an edge or an information asymmetry there that I don't have. Now, what do you do? What do you have an information asymmetry on or an edge on? It's like you're talking to companies all the time. You know what's getting funded and what isn't. Like I love listening to our investors on two things. One is market dynamics, like what's it going to take to raise some more money? What terms are things clearing at? Like what are ARR multiples these days? Blah, blah, blah. Like they have good market data on this because that's their job. And the second is like best practices around, I don't want to say the mechanics of running your company, but like pretty mechanical things about running your company. Like, oh, we're hiring a VP of sales. Like, what should we comp them? Or like, what does an equity package usually look like? Or we're thinking about starting an SDR team. Like, how should we do it? Like, there's best practice stuff that is generalizable across companies that is not your company specific, where frankly, you should not be innovating, where you actually do want to copy paste the like winning playbook. And they have seen the winning playbook more than you have because you have N equals 1 or however many companies you've done. Whereas they've got the whole, definitionally, they have a whole portfolio, right? So that's, I think, where I like to listen and where I don't like to listen.
I like that a lot. I feel like that's actually a really clear framework. So I really appreciate that one. Changing gears a little bit. So as a founder, you pretty much wear all the hats, right? And in particular, you often wear the CFO and the CRO hat at the same time, which later you'll of course like separate. But in many like sales-led SaaS businesses, finance and revenue teams don't always work well together. It works well when it's all inside your head, but less so
Sure.
when it's in two people's heads. And like, for example, pricing is often treated as this is either a sales or a product decision, even though like financial planning and pricing models and complexity, all that like impacts everything that the CFO pays attention to.
Yes.
What would your advice be to SaaS CFOs to shift their approach to better partner with product and sales orgs?
I think two things. One is you kind of have to have credibility as a real business leader. And I think that requires you to actually deeply understand the product and the customer. And the second is I think you need to avoid, and I would give the same exact advice to legal teams because I think the dynamic is pretty similar. You have to avoid a dynamic where it feels like people come to you and you say no. And I'm not saying you should like let people do things that they shouldn't do that are like bad for the company. It was like there has to be a real get to yes attitude, I think, like in the function. Because if the take of the sales leader is like, I come to the CFO and they just tell me no, well, guess what's going to start happening? They're just going to stop going to the CFO.
Right.
And so I think you need the credibility of like, hey, listen, I have a seat at the table. I have a voice because I like have done the work. I'm not just going to opine about, well, I haven't talked to customers, but this is what they might want. It's like, oh, actually, like, this is what we're seeing. And this is maybe why we want to price this thing in XYZ way. And the second is like, sometimes the business will want to do things that put it in a slightly more precarious financial position. And the answer can't be no. The answer should be, listen, we could do that, but this is what you should understand. These are the risks of doing it if it goes poorly. These are the benefits of doing it if it goes well. Like, I think both of these roles are really advisory roles. And I think the job of the advisor is not to make the decision. It's to help the group understand the various facets of the decision so that we can make the kind of like globally optimal decision knowing what we know. And so I think it's like you want the CFO to have a seat at the table because you want to know like what is the financial impact of XYZ? Like what is this going to do to our cash burn? What is this going to do to the various metrics we care about? But I think it doesn't work when the answer is like, well, no, gross margin can never drop below X. Like that's the rule. It's like, well, it's not that simple.
Yeah, totally. I think especially as the CFOs get sort of more tooling and more expanded strategic scope, their role is kind of changing in how they're playing with the rest of the team to achieve kind of the goals.
Yes.
when you think about like CFOs who are like really good at this, um, sort of rather than being an absolutist in the sort of working with the teams, what else rather than being an absolutist, being sort of like really thinking problems through with the rest of the team, what else do you find that they're doing, especially when it comes to like leveraging modern tools or really seeing the bigger picture in a way that maybe CFOs didn't when they were just more bean counters?
Yeah, I think there is like the finance and accounting part of the role. And then there's like the strategic finance, like let's like what if the future looks this way? Like what does that imply? It's like that second bucket, I think is more strategic. Like, look, the accounting stuff is obviously important. That's like what we do as a business. Like we have a fractional CFO arm. We like close your books for you, do tax prep. Like, of course, it's important that it's done well. But fundamentally, it is the rear view mirror. It tells you where you've been. It doesn't tell you where you're going. And startups principally ought to care about where they're going. And so I think like with that orientation, it's like, okay, how will this play out if we continue on the current path? And what does that imply about the like health of the company? And do we urgently need to change course, or actually are we very happy kind of doing what we're currently doing? Like those are the kinds of conversations that I think are like very interesting and very strategic, and actually are only enabled by good insight into the health of the business and good ability to kind of model where it's going.
Yeah. What is that? Think connecting that back to like if you're, for example, looking for a CFO, what makes for a great one that who can do those things that we're just talking about?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think at the end of the day, like I think any of these executives, it's like you want someone fairly like interdisciplinary. Like, you know, being great at Excel like is helpful, but it's in some ways like not the highest order bit on, you know, is this person going to be a good thought leader to the company? And I think that's actually the question, which is like kind of table stakes. I'm sort of assuming that the candidates you're talking to have the skills that they need to do the job. Like, of course, you should vet that. But the difference between good and great is not like, it's not that. It's, is this a person whose voice I want to have around the table when I'm making the substantive and important decisions of the company? It is the same bar in a way as you should hold for your board members or any other execs that you hire, which is like they're going to be in the meeting, they're going to hear stuff, they're going to say stuff, and that's going to influence the outcome of the company. Do you feel good about that? If you don't feel good about that, like it's probably not the right choice.
Yeah. When it comes to some of the things that are not at the highest level, where like it's not the most, um, well, actually, for any given bit of it, maybe even at the highest level, how do you see like automation and AI transforming things about the office of the CFO broadly? Um, yeah, on any level.
Yeah, my sense, and obviously like some of this is like it is embedded in the pilot thesis as well, where we think there are huge kind of gains to be made here, is like the challenge with the function historically and with lots of functions is like they sort of didn't have access to software almost, which is like there's a bunch of things that are done super manually or really kind of hackily because like that those were the tools that were available, that was the skill set that was available kind of to the people on the team. I think if we're really entering a world, first of all, like there's a proliferation of great tools, and that helps a lot, obviously. And like the cost to write code is also just like dropping dramatically. And so I expect to see much more automation. First on like very basic things. Like, okay, how do we get the data from place A to place B? And if we can actually like do that nightly or in real time instead of like once a week or once a month, like that's pretty interesting. That unlocks stuff. So I think we'll see more, increasingly more and more and more of that. Like this is a pretty out of left field example, but like if you're running a restaurant, I was talking to a restaurant owner of this restaurant in Boston, and he said, listen, one of the things we did that no restaurants do is we generated a P&L every week because we wanted to know. We'd look and say, what happened this week? Did we make money or did we lose money? Because what happens is your restaurant is actually going out of business this whole time and you don't even know it because like you're not looking at the numbers, like you're not sampling kind of like aggressively enough to know like what is happening in the health of the business. Now, obviously, a SaaS company is very different than a restaurant, but I think the same thing is sort of true. I think in the limit, the notion of like the monthly close, the monthly forecast, the monthly budget, like hopefully all that stuff is going away in favor of something that is a little bit more real time, a little bit more responsive, that actually like lets you react more quickly, like when stuff happens.
I really appreciate the restaurant example because like the shorter time frame makes it even more clear that if you make the change on week one, the next 3 weeks could be profitable.
Right.
Whereas if you don't, then you basically like
right. And then you look back at the end of the month and actually we're further in the hole. Like again, it's this idea that you are going out of business, you just don't know it yet. Like that's pretty terrifying. And I think that's actually the case for most restaurants for some structural reasons too, not just tooling, but
some of them do manage to make money. So
it's true. It's hard. It's hard.
I think, especially given that, there's at least this perception that finance teams are reluctant to adopt tooling. Do you feel like that's real or it's just perception? And if it's like, in either case, why do you think it is?
I don't know. I think it probably is real, or at least stereotypically it's real. And I think it's because like what is drilled in your head in the profession is a vibe of conservatism. And that's generally a good thing. Like you actually don't want your accountant to be creative. Like that's a very bad adjective for your accountant. Like the same is true of your CFO. The same is true of your lawyer. Like you want them to do the conservative, well-trodden thing, typically because there are no outsized benefits to straying from the kind of like well-hewed path. I tell this to founders all the time. I'm like, don't innovate on the back office. Do the same thing everyone else is doing. This is not going to like kill or make your company. It's just going to cause you heartburn down the road. Just copy paste what the other best companies are doing. And I think that attitude gets drilled into the heads of finance teams. And I think it is generally correct.
Yeah.
Now, I think we happen to be at a pretty unique time in the office of the CFO or whatever you want to call it, where, the reason we said not to be creative is because there were no real benefits to being creative. It was purely downside. Now it's like, okay, actually, and again, creativity on tools is very different than creativity on other stuff. It's like, actually, well, can we make smarter decisions if we took advantage of system XYZ or tool XYZ? And I think increasingly folks are kind of warming to that idea, especially when like a bunch of labor can be saved. Like if you can say, I can do this a lot faster, I can do this a lot more accurately, and that makes me a better partner to the business. Like, okay, now that's actually pretty interesting.
On that note, when you do adopt something as a finance team, by definition, you're going to change something operationally, right?
Yes.
And that always carries this like set of risks with it, of potentially like disrupting things in like a negative way, in how things are working. What can they do to sort of do this with getting as much of the upside and the promise, and limiting the downside or the disruption?
Yeah, it's interesting. And this is the analogy I'm going to give you here is our second company was a group chat tool for businesses. It was kind of like a Slack-like product at its time when Slack was making a mobile game. And the big lesson for me from that company, which Dropbox ultimately acquired about 2 years into it, was you have to sort of pick one of two paths when you're asking someone to do something new. Either you have to give them something that is basically isomorphic to something they already know how to do, that is just, marginally better or more efficient or whatever in some way. Like you get behind the wheel of the electric car, it approximately drives like a gas powered car. Like you don't have to learn to drive again. You just like hop in, you're like, this is faster and I can charge it at home. Like that's pretty cool. That's convenient. Great. That's like a pretty easy adoption curve in some sense, in that you don't have to adjust user behavior. The other option is I do ask you to adjust your behavior. And if I do that, I need to show you the carrot or the light at the end of the tunnel very clearly early on, because the kind of commitment I'm making to you is do it my different and weird way. And in exchange, I promise you that things are going to be better. And I'm giving you a little taste of how and why they're going to be better to kind of keep you hooked. And I think this is sort of the reasoning I would apply to the finance team, which is like, if you're adopting something and the output essentially like is isomorphic to what you were getting before. Like it feels the same if the users interact with it in approximately the same way. That's very easy to just kind of like drop in, and it's fine because like no one had to change their workflow. Now, if people have to change their workflows, then you kind of need to bring them along for the ride. And they need to understand why, hey, yes, you're breaking my workflow. I'm instead going to do this workflow, but I'm giving you a taste of like, well, this is why it's going to be so much better like when you do it my way. So I think you kind of, the uncanny valley, the danger zone to be in is I'm making you do it differently, but I haven't motivated why you ought to do it differently. And then probably it just like doesn't get adopted or people complain or whatever because you haven't motivated kind of what's in it for them.
Something that I think about on related to that when we're building and selling Subscript is I have a lot of empathy for my buyer because I can say a lot of things and I know them to be true. Like I'm not lying to anybody. But how do they know that this is true? Like how do they know that the benefit I'm promising is real, or how do they know that the efficiency I'm promising is real? And it's a really tough gig for finance leaders when adopting technology. Um, if you were in their seat, how would you like deal with that? Like, how do you? It's so opaque whether the thing is going to work. Like, and if it doesn't, the consequences in finance land are like not super trivial because generally you're investing quite a lot of time and effort and attention and all of those things and changing processes. So how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, it's tough, and it doesn't help that there have been like decades of false promises on this stuff too. Like I think everyone probably has a story of like, well, we put in system XYZ because we thought it was going to ABC, and in fact it did not. It's interesting. I think there's kind of like two options. So the question is sort of like, how do I get you over the hump at the time of sale, and how do I get you over the hump at the time of implementation? And in some ways, the time of sale is a little bit easier because ideally, like you lean on your brand or your reference customers or whatever. And like Pilot actually has this problem in a big way too, which is you can't really try. We do tax prep for you. You can't really try like we do accounting for you. There's no like trial of your accountant. And so the buying decision ends up being very brand driven, actually. It's like, do my friends use this? Does this seem like a real company? Are they responsive? Do I like their website? It's like, actually, these things are pretty uncorrelated with whether we're good at accounting and tax. We happen to be, but like not structurally for those reasons. And I liken it to like when you pick a doctor. It's like you go and like, are they wearing a white coat? Is their office clean? Do my friends go here? Is there a diploma on the wall? Like, you don't quiz them about like what do the kidneys do, or like, what is this particular enzyme? It's like you actually have no ability to assess whether or not they're really going to deliver. You're relying on these secondary signals kind of at time of sale. So, and then it's unfortunate that that's the case, but you sort of have to lean into the secondary signals. I think at like time of use or time of implementation, I think the best thing you can do is really just like clearly mutually set expectations. Like I think that the times that people are unhappy are not when it didn't work. It's when they thought a certain thing was going to happen at a certain time and it didn't. Like that's, I think, the thing that freaked people out. If I think it's going to take 8 weeks and it takes 8 weeks, fine. If I think it's going to take 2 weeks and it takes 8 weeks, I'm like pretty annoyed. And so there's just a lot of like mutual expectation setting and checking in that I think like gives people the confidence that like, oh yeah, I'm on track, or this is going according to plan. Like this, I shouldn't be worried. And importantly, I'm not going to look bad, right? Because I've also probably told my boss like, oh, XYZ is going to happen by ABC date. It's like, you got to now help me not look bad. Or ideally, you're helping me look good.
Yeah. And how do you look good?
Well, ideally by achieving whatever the outcome is, right? Like we make better decisions faster, or it depends. Like, oh, I saved you a bunch of money, or like I made you look smart in a meeting, or, it's like I helped you identify this problem with your business. It's like there are a variety of ways you can make me look good. But it's interesting because sometimes actually it's very hard to make you look good. Sometimes the only thing you can do is basically be neutral or make you look bad. Like we do tax prep for businesses all the time. And it is rare that we finish a tax return and someone's like, oh my God, you guys nailed it. Like, that's awesome. It's like, yeah, you did my tax return. You had one job. You did it. Good job. Congratulations. You want me to pat you on the back? Like of course you did. Now in the rare event something goes wrong, like people are furious. So it's like, your set points are either like met expectations or disappointment. And so that can be hard, which is like, okay, how can you figure out how to either like get a win for the customer in this, or like inject some delight or something that actually takes it from like where you have some hope of winning as opposed to some hope of just like not losing.
I really like that. I think of it as like a pass fail business versus like, you can get an A+.
Totally.
You can't get an A+ when preparing tax returns, unfortunately.
Not really. I mean, maybe if I like saved you a ton of money, or like the times when you can't get the A+ is like you write us a panicked letter about like this notice you got from the IRS about how you owe all this money and we fix it for you. Then it's like, okay, cool, you saved me. I like that.
Yeah.
But like hopefully that doesn't, hopefully that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen that often. And also hopefully you're not the cause of it, right? If you get the panicked letter because of something we messed up, again, it's like even when we go to great lengths to fix it, you're like, yeah, of course you did. You were the ones who messed it up,
Switching gears a little bit to actually related to the earlier topic we had about, the different different environments in which companies have interactions with VCs. Subscript recently raised a Series A. You have raised so many rounds and so much capital in your career with the 3 startups. What do you now in 2025? What is the advice that you're giving founders who are raising capital, especially given your large angel portfolio?
It depends on the kind of business. I think it's like the sweet spot. This is sort of like not very valuable advice. It's like raise the right amount. Like there are dangers to raising too much. There are very material dangers to raising too little. If you have to pick one, I probably recommend you raise too much, but then also don't spend it. Like we raised a very big round, in early 2020, and we were very, very disciplined about what we did with it. It's all still on the balance sheet, basically. And that has really served us very well. Whereas I think if we had raised a ton of money and immediately like ratcheted up the burn, I guess fine. Here's my piece of advice, which is your burn basically only ratchets up. It requires extreme pain on the part of the company to reduce the burn rate. And so if you're going to increase burn, make sure you understand like what you're getting in exchange for doing it, and that is worth it, because it is sort of a one-way door.
Yeah. How do you figure out the right amount?
How do you figure out the right amount to raise or spend?
Yeah.
I mean, I like the burn multiple as a good rule of thumb. Like the ratio of net ARR to burn is that healthy? And the reason I like it is it's like a good kind of catch-all rule of thumb. Is like if it's off, something is probably wrong in the business. It doesn't exactly. It's like check engine light. It doesn't tell you exactly what needs to be fixed, but it tells you like, oh, you should probably like double click on something here.
Yeah. And the amount to raise?
I mean, more than you think you need. I think, again, if like you think about the path, it's like the fundraise needs to get you to one of two spots. It needs you to get to profitability, sustainability, or it needs to get you to being able to raise the next round. And so with every round, I encourage folks to say, okay, fine, what would my metrics need to be to raise the next round? How long do I think it will take me to get there? What do I think I'm going to do from a personnel perspective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Build in some buffer. That's the most principled way to determine how much you should raise. And I do think ideally you have like done some work to like formulate that number. Sometimes the amount you raise is just like the amount you can raise, and like it's a little bit less principled. It's like, well, these people would be willing to give me X at Y valuation, and like, yeah, intuitively it feels like I could get to the next level like with that amount of money. But I think that's the rough calculus that I encourage folks to do, because if you over raise, again, it's like there's some dilution, but it's like not the end of the world if you don't spend it. If you under raise, you get stuck in the dead zone. Like you haven't achieved enough to get more money, and you're probably pretty far from the profitability course. Like that's where you really get burned. You really have to stay in one lane or the other.
I feel like the opinions on how to use a model for this purpose like are extremely varied, where some people are the whole purpose of the model is for me to torture it to like give the conclusion that I want, and for some people it's I don't care about this at all, and like right. Just do whatever. And some people like, I live and die by this thing, like every cell matters to me. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'm somewhere in between, which is it's a little bit of a vibes thing for me, which is like you want someone who has done the rigorous work. My challenge with the super rigorous work is like you can sometimes trick yourself because there's like such high variance on the inputs, and you think like, oh, I mathematically figured out exactly when we're going to hit whatever. But it's actually like, we have no real idea like what the growth rate is going to look like, over the next 18 months or whatever. So I think you want it to pass the smell test. And obviously, like, the more infrastructure you have here, the easier that is to do. Like, the more sophisticated your kind of internal tracking of this, the easier it is to do. At the same time, I think you need to be a little bit careful about like overly trusting the model. Now, in practice, that's probably not what happens. In practice, people probably under model. It's probably not the case that people like over model. So if you have to do one, I think it's like, yeah, probably you should do the math to make sure you're comfortable with like the approximate shape of what this is going to look like. Even the very simple math of, okay, I have X amount of cash. My burn rate is currently Y. I contemplate the burn rate going up to Z. What does that imply about the number of months of runway I have? Do I think I can get there in time with enough spare runway to raise the next round? Like, that is, you should definitely do that. And that is like a pretty quick back of the envelope thing. Now, should you be more sophisticated than that? I think it depends on kind of who you are.
Yeah, I have a pitch for why I'm more or less with you, but I really do love a good model, and the reason for it actually is like purely psychological, which is uncertainty is like very uncomfortable,
Yes.
and very stressful, and the uncertainty doesn't go away when you have a model at all, but it does give you one potential picture of the future, and it's
That's
totally
true.
not the actual picture of what the future will be, but it gives you just an anchor point so you can see in what ways the future is developing differently. And it gives you one way to visualize a plausible future. And I find that to be calming, you know?
Yeah. I mean, even understanding the parameters, like, well, look, if this is X rather than Y, is that catastrophic or is that fine? Like I agree that what's interesting is like, it's like taking notes. Like for me in school, and I think there's lots of people, but I don't know, for me, I would like meticulously take notes during class and I would never look at the notes. And it was actually like the act of writing the notes just helped me remember. And similarly, like you're building the model just to force yourself in a structured way to kind of wrap your arms around the business, even if you never consult the model again. I guess the other reason too is like, listen, you want to be sharp on the details when folks ask you. Like one of the things that our board member from Sequoia says, which I think is exactly right, he's like, if you don't like have good forecasts, it's because you actually don't understand how your business works. And the goal, like if you really understood the drivers of your business, you would be able to predict it. And like no one really does, but the closer you get to that, it's like, oh, no, we actually do understand how this works. We know that when XYZ leads come in, it converts at this rate and it turns into this many ops and this much revenue. Like, and if you're just like surprised every month at where the month ends, like that suggests that you have not really gotten your arms around how your business works. And the same is true of the model.
I also love, related to that, a premortem of like, here's all the variables that will drive the thing. And then what are the things that could impact those variables? So like you should know what drives the business and you should know which variables matter, but you should also know what are the assumptions or like the conditions which makes the variables go one way or another. So when things don't go according to the plan, because they won't, you are like, oh, it was that. I knew that was one of the things, and
Yes.
turned out to be the thing.
Yes, like, oh, we actually hit the right number of leads, but actually ACVs are down, or like, and that's expected because we're targeting a different customer base, and they have like, they buy the baby SKU, and so okay, fine, we understand why that happened, and we know what we need to do about it.
Which is like a great place to be. It doesn't seem like a great place to be because when new revenue is down or whatever, but it's still a great place to be because you now have all, like, you see more of the cards, so now you can decide what your next move is.
Right, you at least know what to do. Like you have diagnosed the problem. The times that have been the most frustrating or challenging for me in my own founder journey is like the number is not what we wanted to, and no one knows why. And people have competing theories. The head of sales says, "Oh, marketing isn't giving us enough good leads." The marketing person says, "Well, no, they're great leads, and sales reps are not calling them fast enough. They're not closing them." And it's like, and then you have to just like really get into the weeds to diagnose like, okay, what happened? And it's like, actually, if you like had the dashboard, you could look, okay, where is it red? Yes, the lead to op conversion rate or whatever. Like that's where the issue is. Like, fine, let's figure out why that is.
just another random thought that brought for me is like, you have to take great execution off the table as like a potential factor, because if you're always wondering if we have great execution, then you can't ever figure out whether your strategy is right, because you're just like
Right.
stuck figuring out whether have you had great execution. So that needs
Yes.
to be off the table for you to do anything right.
And the challenge with that is there are no real cheat codes to determine if it's being done. Like, you kind of have to just go and look. Like, when it's going well, you can assume that execution is good. When it is not going well, I have found that you really need to get into the weeds and see why. And there's an anecdote from one of our advisors where their company was starting a European office, and like, it wasn't working in Europe for some reason. It's like, oh, people weren't buying the thing. And people had various theories like, well, maybe the European market isn't ready. Maybe we haven't like sufficiently like localized the product, whatever. And so the guy just like gets on a plane and goes to the London office or whatever it is. And he's there, and it's like 10 o'clock, and like the sales reps are just starting to show up, and they're like making espresso, and they're like chit chatting. It's like, oh, it's not working because we have the wrong people here. Like, because we're not, it's purely an execution problem. And then they just like rebooted the team, and lo and behold, it worked. It was not a strategy problem. It was purely an execution problem. And you would not know that from California. Like, you actually probably did, in fact, need to go and see the work that was being done to understand like whether it was working or not working, and maybe why.
I think that's like the 3-letter piece of advice from this whole video: just always show up.
Sure. There's no substitute for just being there, unfortunately. Like, you wish there were. You're like, I hired this great exec. Now I don't need to think about this. You kind of still do need to think about it.
For sure. You've like a spectacular history of both fundraising and selling companies. You've raised from Sequoia, Stripe, Jeff Bezos, others. You've sold 2 companies. When it comes to like how folks evaluate financials, what is something that startups get wrong when preparing for those events?
I think you have to understand like what kind of deal your deal is. Meaning, is it like a team? Is it a bet on the team? Is it a bet on the narrative? Or is it a bet on the metrics? And as you get later stage, it becomes less and less a story round and more a spreadsheet round, where it's just like, look, the bet we're making here is that you have a machine that we can scale. And like the way we determine that is like looking at the numbers. The story always matters. Like, never underinvest in the story. And I think people, like, even on spreadsheet rounds, people fail to like appreciate the importance of the story. But I think you have to understand kind of like, well, what is your pitch and what is being de-risked in this round? And you need like the financials and the data room and all that stuff need to tell the right story for that stage of, I don't want to say diligence exactly, but like what are the things that investors are trying to de-risk to decide whether to put more money into this? And sometimes that is a deep look at the financials. Sometimes it's, I want to talk to 3 customers who rave about how good you are. And like the financials, actually, it's like a little bit too soon to say anyway. So like, let's not bother with them.
That's a great point. And so, like, if you were to characterize the financial maturity when it comes to like these various rounds, like, what would you like? How would you characterize evolution?
I mean, it definitely has to get more sophisticated, which is like the expectation in each subsequent round is like you have your house more in order. And it will depend on the business. And again, like for our business, for example, like gross margin was very heavily scrutinized at every fundraising round of ours. And so like you need good reporting on gross margin, and like you need a story for like why it's trending the way it's trending. And that happened to be a thing that like investors really lasered in on in pilots funding rounds. For another business, like, it could matter less. And actually maybe what the investors are going to care much more about is the SaaS metrics, which is like how's ARR trending, like what is net retention like? What is the churn rate? What is CAC to LTV? It's like, it really, it's very kind of like business specific and stage specific. And again, it goes with like, what are we trying to de-risk in this round? Or what do we need to believe about the world for this to be true? In the early days, it's like, I believe the team is good and that the future is going to look like this. They may be in the next round. It's like, I believe that they've found product market fit. They have a small number of passionate people. And the bet is like, can they start to scale it? It's like, okay, they start to scale it. Can they really build a repeatable like go-to-market motion around it? And it's like, okay, well, what are the economics of that go-to-market motion? And like, have they gotten to like $1 in, $1.01 out? Like that's kind of the like trajectory of like over time, the business is more and more and more. The questions in some ways focus, and it becomes much more about like, okay, mechanically, like how good a business is this? Will this ultimately like generate some discounted cash flows or whatever?
Right. Right. Very cool. As we're reaching sort of the end, a question I have around financial advice is like, looking ahead, what's one piece of financial advice that more SaaS founders and CFOs should take more seriously?
I think this message has already been beaten into the drum. Like the drum has been beaten on this enough, but I do think folks need to understand that like the last round you raised may in fact be your last round. And that actually like there's probably a pretty high bar to clear to like get access to additional capital. And like you should not assume that that is a sure thing. If you're growing well or like if the underlying metrics are super healthy, like yeah, sure, you may have access to capital, but like I think there was this attitude, you know, in 2020, 2021, which is like, yeah, we can almost go back to the well and like get more. I just don't really think that's true unless you are like the bar is even higher now, right? Like people look at the graph of like Cursor's ARR growth or like that kind of like, oh yeah, you added 100 million in a year or whatever. Like, yes, we want to fund that. Like you doubled year over year. Like it's impressive, but it's, you know, the game has changed here around what people's expectations are. And I think you need to make sure you're not playing by the old rules.
How do you deal with the fact that by the time you're playing the game again, i.e., by the time you're fundraising again, chances are the rules will have changed? You've seen this repeatedly, you know, like every couple of years is a different regime. How do you like deal with that uncertainty? Because there's no way to predict how that's gonna go, like unfold.
I mean, the cheat code on that is like you have to build a business that is sustainable or that has a credible path to sustainability. Meaning, you don't have to be on that path, but you want the like emergency pull handle to like be available. And if you have to pull it and stop the train, that you can. If you have that, you have a credible alternative. And if you have a credible alternative, you have leverage. And if you have leverage, you will get to good outcomes. If your only option is to take money and you'll accept any terms because you have to, like that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
And so you really have to like to control your own destiny. You have to have a credible alternative.
Yeah. And that gives you a little bit of insurance against sort of the ways that the world change.
And you may not want to take that alternative, but if needed, you could. Like you might not be happy about it, but it is an option.
Yep. Yep. Anything else to add? Any final words?
I don't think so. I mean, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this.